Hey, fool, this ain't no football game.
Emma's a pimp!
Wait until the Reaper takes my life.
Lucky for you, you are right where you need to be. So sit back, relax, and turn up the volume on your streaming device. Johnny Ballgame, Sir Poops-a-Lot, and the Fantasy Reaper are about to deliver humor and fantasy gold at the same time. Crush your opponent with a smile. It's Fantasy Sports Island.
Welcome to the island.
Chuckles, how are we tonight?
We are
reaping?
good.
Are we reaping, Fantasy Reaper?
We are kind of reaping tonight, I guess, as you could say. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Island, ladies and gentlemen. My man Johnny Ballgame is over here.
Here I am.
Host champion.
I'm on the other side of the island, Chuck. You're clearly on that side of the island, and I'm on the other side of the island. As you
You're
can
on
tell
the right
by
side of the island.
not at all fake backgrounds.
All right, let's talk a little playoff fantasy football because we're doing this, right?
Yep.
How'd you do this week in playoff fantasy football, John?
Man, I started off gangbusters because Kelsey went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
He did.
So here's the thing. I paid up for a couple of positions. I went tight end because I thought Kelsey would go off, and I wasn't wrong. By the way, I changed my entire lineup right before the games on Saturday. Just completely wiped out my other one, went with some gut feels, and some of them were very good. Some were, Kelsey I knew was going to go off. I knew Burrow was going to go off. And then after that's where it got a bit dicey for me because I didn't really have anybody else go off. So, it was a bit rough.
Just so that the people know, if you're just tuning in, we did a playoff fantasy football in the style of DraftKings where you get a certain salary cap and you have to fit those guys underneath the salary cap. So you can pick whoever you want, but
Right.
you like when you take Kelsey and you take Burrow, who are very expensive, and you had McCaffrey, you don't have a lot of money left to get
Right. So and I even had ETN. So I had Burrow, ETN, McCaffrey, Christian Kirk, T. Higgins, Travis Kelsey. I really thought that I went into the week I thought my two kind of weak ones were Jet McKinnon, who had been scoring touchdowns, so I didn't feel like it was that weak. And then I had to throw Michael Gallup in because I had no money left. And I had to pay down and get Giants defense, but I didn't really like any of the defenses anyway this week. So I kind of knew I was going to take a hit there. Gallup did zero. He literally, and when I said did zero, I mean he actually did zero. And then, McCaffrey, 24. I mean, it was okay, right? 10 rushes for 35 yards. He luckily got a touchdown because he only had 6 catches for 22 yards on that side. So that one I paid so far up for McCaffrey. He was the one pay up that didn't pay off. So, and it really did kind of kill me.
I went contrarian with my lineup this week, and it paid off.
It paid off big.
I went down a little bit. I got Jalen Hurts, but I played Etienne, Mixon, and Pollard. So I passed on Christian McCaffrey. Now, Pollard would have been a good play had he not gotten hurt, but he didn't really kill me because I was able to fit in Debo, Devontae Smith, Skinny Batman, who went off. I got Kadarius Toney in there for real cheap, and he did pretty well. And I got Dallas Goedert at tight end, and the Eagle defense. They were the best defense to have this week. So overall, I had the top score going contrarian. But I don't know if we're going to be able to do that again this week. Things are different this week because what we do is each week we subtract $5,000 off the salary cap. So now we have $5,000 less to spend on a lineup this week.
It's rough this week, kids.
It's rough.
It's rough.
It does. Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the show. Tonight we're going to discuss the 4 games we watched last week. Some of them good, some of them not so good. We will move on to this week's games, the 2 AFC and NFC North Championship games. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to do our season in review and finish up our top 10s at running back, tight end, and defense and discuss, what we think of the guys that finish in the top 10 in points per game. And will we draft them next year, etc. So we'll get into that real quick. First thing we want you to do, though, John, if they like the channel, what should they do?
Hit the like button. Hit it. Don't really hit it. I mean, I don't want you to break your technology, but what you do is you take your mouse or your thumb or your finger if you're on your phone there, and you just click it. You click the like button. It's a thing that goes like this.
And they should hit that subscribe button, right, John? Because I think we do this almost every week.
Damn near every week. Damn near. We take a few weeks off here and there. But I'll tell you what, we're more on than we are off. Tell you that much.
Right. And we'll be here, throughout the off season. It won't be every week. It'll be, every couple weeks or so. But we're gonna keep you informed in the fantasy off season and get you geared up for 2023. So don't forget to subscribe. You'll want to watch this content. And now, without any more begging, let's just move on and get on with the show.
Fantasy Reaper, I need to ask a quick question. Did you get a haircut today?
I got a haircut a few days ago. Thank you for noticing, John.
Fresh. Looking fresh, my friend.
Looking fresh for the show, Johnny.
Yes, sir. Listen, folks, this is the kind of stuff you're going to get. He went and got a haircut for you. He got a haircut for you.
Totally all for you guys. Because I didn't need one or anything.
You're welcome, America.
You're welcome. On the news and notes, I only got a couple this week. Let's just roll through them real quick. So quarterback Aaron Rodgers is open to reworking his deal with the Packers if he decides to play again. So that just leaves me one question, John. Should Aaron Rodgers play again?
I mean, it's kind of old, right? But so is Brady. Brady still plays. I think he's still got something left in the tank. I think he could still be effective on the right team. I'd like to see him go to the Raiders, actually. I actually really would. I'm not a giant Rodgers fan. I would like to get him out of my division of the Central, or the North, rather. But I would kind of like to see him go to the Raiders.
I think that the Raiders are earmarked for Tom Brady, personally.
Yeah.
But Aaron Rodgers is going to be tough to trade because of his contract. But if he reworks his deal to a more affordable cap number, then maybe he can get traded. I don't know, though. You know who I feel bad for, John?
Who that?
Quarterback there. Jordan Love. He's been waiting. This will be his fourth year if Rodgers comes back, waiting for his turn. And honestly, I think the Packers are better off to just cut bait, trade him, get rid of him, whatever you got to do, and move on to Jordan Love, who I thought was the better quarterback this year when he got some minutes. I actually thought he threw the ball with more zip, and he was more effective throwing the ball down the field. I thought Aaron Rodgers was check down Charlie. He was very mediocre in fantasy football.
He was mediocre, yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you had Rodgers, he did not finish in the top 5 at quarterback. Not once, all season.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad.
It was bad. I do think Love had a little more rapport with some of the younger receivers because they worked a little bit more together. So, I'm with you. I think he could use a change of pace, and I think the Packers could use a change of pace at quarterback. So, hoping to see him move on. You might be right about Brady there. I think the Jets are another possible landing spot. I know Woody Johnson has actually said that he's willing to pay a lot of money to get Rodgers there. So
that would be perfect.
Yeah.
That would be perfect. All right.
Just like his former mentor there in the Packers, he'd go to the Jets. Maybe then he can follow up with a Vikings stint.
Yeah. All right. How about Bill O'Brien? He's returning to New England as their offensive coordinator. He'll be Mac Jones' new coordinator there in New England, and that can't be anything but good news for the Patriots. Yeah. The coordinators that were there last year and had no clue what they were doing did Mac Jones no service whatsoever. They made him worse. And I think this could be really good for Bill O'Brien to be Mac Jones' coordinator. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I feel like Mac Jones was a little bit like Billy Madison. He was now dumber for having worked for the offensive coordinators who were there last year. No, I think Bill O'Brien's an excellent coordinator. I actually think he got a raw deal with the Texans. I thought he was actually a pretty good coach. I just don't think he ever had the talent to get over it. He's done a really nice job in Alabama the last couple of years. I think this is awesome news for Mac Jones. I really do.
And Joe Judge, we award you 0 points. May God rest your soul.
That's fantastic.
All right. Cowboys. All right. Running back Tony Pollard suffered ligament damage when he suffered a high ankle sprain, and he actually also fractured his tibia. He needs surgery, but he has opted to go with what they call a tightrope procedure instead of the regular surgery that requires screws in the tibia and fibula for repair. In this procedure called tightrope, a braided polyethylene cord rather than a rigid surgical screw is applied to restore the original position of the bone and to allow for better and proper healing. He should be ready for the start of training camp. This is all news to me. I've never heard of this procedure, but it sounds like it's less intrusive, and it's not like they're putting a rigid rod in his foot or his leg. It's actually something that bends and gives a little bit. So I can see how that could help. But
yeah, it's kind of cool.
First of all, is Tony Pollard going to be back in Dallas because he's a free agent? And if he's not, where do you think he's going?
I think he'll be back. I think Zeke doesn't come back. I think they'll get rid of Zeke.
You think they'll cut him?
I do, or try to trade him. I don't think anybody will trade for him because his contract's probably a little too much. I think they're going to end up waiving him or trying to rework the deal and have both of them back again. I think they like Pollard a lot. His burst is incredible. He was clearly the better back of the two. And even Zeke said he wants to be back in Dallas, but he can't. Nobody knows the future. So
you don't always get what you want.
That is correct, McJagger.
All right. Let's talk about the games this weekend.
All right.
Last weekend, all right? We're starting Kansas City. Kansas City held off Jacksonville 27-20. I want to get your thoughts on the game, fantasy-wise, and just, as an NFL fan. What did you think of Patrick Mahomes' play after he sprained? He does have a high ankle sprain. So he played through it, missed like a quarter, but came back and played pretty well. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I just don't know that I would have taken that chance. Henny was moving the ball. It wasn't like Henny came in and sucked the place up. He went on a 95-yard drive and scored a touchdown. So I'm not sure I would have taken that chance. However, Patrick Mahomes is maybe one of the greatest athletes, quarterbacks I've seen, right? I mean, just think about, usually it takes people, and I know he came back on adrenaline, and I know that, this week is going to be really rough for him. But he came back after sitting out a quarter, which means it had already started to swell up. It had already gotten to a sore spot. So, and I was pretty impressed with him coming back to win. I also have to say, I was really impressed with Jacksonville doing what they did at the end of the season. So kudos to them, but Mahomes is Mahomes and Kelsey's Kelsey. And at the end of the day, that was too much.
Travis Kelce, 14 catches for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yes.
Magnificent game. I mean, he wasn't really getting down the field much. There were a lot of short passes. But I don't know if you watched. The defenders were hanging all over him, cutting off his routes, double teaming him, and he was still getting open. I mean, those two have an amazing connection together.
Yeah.
And what do we think? Well, we'll talk about the Bengal game in a little bit. But just real quick, is Travis Kelce someone you consider playing in your DraftKings lineup or our lineup?
Yeah, he's going to be super expensive, so you're gonna have to figure out if you want to spend up. But by God, Travis Kelce in the playoffs is money, and he proved it again yesterday. So he's worth the pay up if you can figure out some other stuff and you kind of get lucky and hit on some lower people. Kelce is maybe the best tight end who's ever played the game.
I don't think it's maybe. I think he is. And in my opinion, he is. Tony Gonzalez was great. And, Antonio Gates was great. But
Gronk was really great.
Gronk was great. But to do what he's done consistently over the last, 6-7 years, he's been the number one tight end. He's been dominant. And he continues. It's better in the playoffs, Johnny.
I know. And we all thought he was going to fall off this year. Like everybody's like, there's no way Kelce could keep it up. He kind of looked a little bit like he was getting banged up toward the end of last year. And you're like, maybe Kelce's had his run. He was literally as good this year as he's ever been. And he looks unbelievable in the playoffs.
Also, the gap between Kelce and the next best tight end was a freaking Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
It was the biggest gap between the number one and number two tight end we've seen in fantasy football, maybe ever.
Was it Goddard or was it Hurst? I don't even know who the number 2 tight end was.
Jeez.
Couldn't have been Kittle.
You know what? Let me look on that. Let me put in the tight ends here. I got it right here because I do know it wasn't Andrews. It was Hawkinson. And Hawkinson scored 8 points less per game.
I thought you meant in the playoffs. Oh yeah, Hawkinson was probably number 2, which is still not even close.
Not even close. All right, let's move on to the second game we watched this weekend. Philadelphia hammered the New York Giants 38-7. This was never a game, John. The Giants looked nothing like they looked the week before against the Vikings. I think the Eagles' defense is extremely tough.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts dominated the first half with his passing game, and then they dominated the second half with their running game. So,
yeah, I kind of thought the Eagles might be overrated going into this, right? Like I thought, are they as good as they are? Turns out, yeah. It turns out with the Jalen Hurts getting healthier, still not even 100% yet, but looked way better this week than he did last week. That defense is really, really good. Like, I'm interested to see this game this week. Because, I've been calling for the 49ers in the Super Bowl. I'm a little worried after watching the Eagles kill the Giants last week.
All right, so we'll see if the weather's a factor in Philly this weekend. We'll find out soon in the next couple of days. We'll get the weather report. But let's talk about the Giants. So for the season, they outperformed what we thought they would do.
Sure.
I thought Saquon was really good. I thought Daniel Jones was a lot better than people thought. He was a top 10 quarterback in fantasy football. Right. For next year, though, John, Saquon Barkley is also a free agent looking to restructure his deal. He wants CMC money. I don't think he's going to get it. Do they franchise tag him? Does he end up somewhere else? Yeah,
my gut says they'll be able to work out a deal with Daniel Jones because I don't think Daniel Jones doesn't get top quarterback money, right? I mean, even he's going, I'm not going to be the highest paid quarterback. So I think they'll work out a deal with him, and I think they'll franchise tag Saquon, bring Saquon back next year.
Okay, that makes sense. Good. Yeah. And I want to say props to the coaching staff. Brian Daboll did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
he got the most at what he could. He didn't have a lot of weaponry. A lot of people got hurt. I think they load up at wide receiver to help Daniel Jones in the offseason, or at least make a few trades, minor or draft picks. If they could beef up their weaponry, I think they could be a really solid team. I like what they did on defense with Thibodeau. Yeah.
They had a really nice pass rush. D-backs got better as the season went on, and I think they were injured back there too. Defense isn't my issue, and I think you're right. I think it's wide receivers. I'd like to see these Ballinger a little bit more. Every now and then he showed flashes. I think next year maybe they use him a little bit more. I think they need to get a backup running back behind Saquon, get somebody young, and that way they use Saquon for all they can this year with a franchise tag, and then they move on from him and bring somebody up. So. But I think you're right. I think wide receivers where they need to go. They've got a little bit of young talent there. I thought Hodges actually came in and looked really good. Yeah. Daboll knew him from his time in Buffalo, so that was kind of nice. They had that connection. I'd keep him as a possession receiver. Slayton shows some potential, maybe. I'm Richie James. I don't know if he's the long-term.
James, bitch.
I'm not sure if he's a long-term solution. And I know the rest of those guys, Galloway and all those guys, they gotta go. Get out.
All right. Moving on to the next game. And we'll talk more Philly when we get to their matchup next week.
Know what, though? I do want to say this, because the Jags, we kind of skipped over them. We touched a little bit on them. If Calvin Ridley comes back right next year, the Jags are scary, man. Like, you're going to move Marvin Jones out. He's old. I mean, you may keep him on just because he's a good, locker room presence. Yeah. But now you're going to have Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Zay Jones under contract. That's a nice trio of wide receivers there. Evan Ingram looked like an actual tight end this year. Really,
free agent though. I hope they bring him back, Johnny.
I think they will. I think he showed enough. I think they try to bring him back. And then you've got Trevor. You've got ETN. Yeah. Even the backup running backs are not bad there. I really like this Jacksonville team coming into next year.
I do too. They have a nice offensive core there, and Trevor Lawrence is going to be a good, sneaky middle ground kind of guy to get a quarterback.
Yeah, and who will end up in the top 10 for sure.
I agree. All right, now we're moving on to the next game.
Yes.
Cincinnati, I know we want to talk about this game because Cincinnati dominated from A to Z over Buffalo 27-10, and it wasn't even that close. I mean, it started off, Joe Burrow just took him down the field, hit Jamar Chase for a touchdown. They got the ball back after a defensive stop, took him down the field for another touchdown. I was super impressed with the way the Bengals played with 3 injured linemen.
Yes.
Tell me, John, how did they do that?
I don't think Buffalo – here's what I think. I think Buffalo was spent physically, emotionally. I think they just didn't have anything left in the tank. They were tired. They had no get-off. 3 backup linemen dominated that defensive line. And, yeah, they were – you're missing what's his face, but it was not the Buffalo team we watched all year, and the Bengals are on a mission. They're on an absolute terror mission. Joe Burrow, I mean, honestly, this started like the Buffalo game the last time before the guy got hurt. If you remember right, that first thing, Cincinnati just had their way with him, went down, scored a touchdown, and then unfortunately the guy had the heart attack. But Just I just thought Cincinnati from every person in there wanted it more, was better.
They were the better team, and it wasn't even close. Now let's talk about the Bills, what they need to do to improve for next year. I was very high coming into this season on Gabe Davis. I thought he could continue what he did in the playoffs last year and bring it into the season, and he did not. He had one game like that where he had a monster game. The rest of the season, he was a disappointment. I don't think he's a true number 2 receiver. I think they need to go out and get a complimentary receiver for Diggs on the other side and let Gabe Davis go back to being the wide receiver 3. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's a great third wide receiver. But who's the other? Is it Isaiah McKenzie? Mm-hmm. Not sure he's the guy. They have that young rookie who showed some flashes this year. Yeah, I like him a little bit coming in. I don't know if he's a true number 2 either, though. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the draft.
Shakir's a good slot receiver. As a third or fourth option, he's fantastic. I think the perfect guy for them, though, if he's healthy, is to go get Odell Beckham like they were talking about doing, but get him from start of the season and let him be the wide receiver 2.
That would be interesting. That would be an interesting look.
Because the Bills, when healthy, with Von Miller on defense, they had a complete team. It just seemed like Josh Allen had to be Superman, and he just ran out of gas, man. You can't ask that man to do as much as he does week in and week out. And after he hurt his elbow, he wasn't the same. And I don't think he ever got it back because he never truly was the guy we saw in the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's got to take care of his body better. I mean, he's got to really learn to slide. I mean, everybody loves it because he runs hard and jumps over people and all that. But I mean, you saw it even in the Bengal game. He's bleeding from his elbow. He's clearly getting the shit beat out of him.
Yeah.
I think they need to look at wide receiver. I think they need to shore up the pass rush. Even if Von Miller comes back, they got to get a few more guys in there. I think they were starting to get a little bit old along that line. So, and they'll get some of their deep backs back. They were really truly injured in the back of their defense. So, I think Buffalo will be back and be a contender next year. Because I'm a Bengals fan, I'm okay with them being out now. But
of course, they'll retool. They'll be back. Yep. They have too much talent. Yep. All right, last game. Pretty good game. San Francisco 19, Dallas 12. Dallas put up a pretty good fight. But I think after the loss of Tony Pollard when he got injured, it kind of took the wind out of their sails. And I just want to say right now, McCarthy deciding to punt with 2 minutes left.
Killed momentum.
Killed the clock. Not only did he didn't punt it right away, he let the clock run down almost to the 2-minute warning and then punted the ball. They had all 3 of their timeouts, but my God, it was like 4th and 4. And San Francisco, was moving the ball pretty well against Dallas. I don't think you punt there. I mean, it's almost impossible to have any time, and it's exactly what happened. San Francisco got 1 first down, left them very little time, and they had no shot.
Yep. Not only that, but at the end of the first half, instead of kicking that field goal, they went for it on 4th down. I thought that was a momentum killer because they could have got points going into the half, and they didn't. It was another McCarthyism to me. I think that guy chokes in big moments. And I know he's won a Super Bowl, and he's got a street named after him in Green Bay. But think about the talent he had in Green Bay. He should have 3 or 4 Super Bowls. The talent he's had in Dallas should have at least 1 more. I mean, they're a really talented team. And he's not – I mean, he's had 2 12-win seasons, but he's been out in the first round of playoffs. So I don't think McCarthy is the guy, personally.
I agree. Now, on the flip side, San Francisco, I'm impressed with their weaponry. I mean, Purdy wasn't great. And Debo wasn't great in this game. Debo wasn't great. Christian McCaffrey wasn't great in this game. But then they just bring in other guys. Kittle makes plays.
Elijah Mitchell looked like a superstar running back.
He had 51 yards on the ground, spelling McCaffrey, whose calf got tight. Okay.
Yeah.
So they just have so much on offense there, and their offensive line is good. Their defensive line is very good. They shut down Dallas's run game. They made it really tough on Dak. I'm starting to believe you when you say that San Francisco is going to be in the Super Bowl, even with a rookie quarterback. You might be right, John.
I feel like I am. I really do.
But the Eagles are going to be tough.
They're going to be really tough. I was a lot more confident about that last week than I am this week. that the
Gotcha.
49ers were going to get to the Super Bowl. I still think it's going to be 49ers Bengals. I think we're in for a couple of really great games this weekend.
Which we're about to get to.
Look at that
How
segue.
about that segue? Let's do it right now.
That's what we in the biz call a segue.
Fearless Fantasy Forecast.
Fearless Fantasy Forecast.
Bing.
Championship weekend, NFC Championship, AFC Championship. We got two fantastic games. Let's start with the morning game. What is on your mind for San Francisco at Philadelphia? The Eagles are favored by 2.5 at home. The over-under is 46. John, fantasy-wise, who are you looking at?
I'm looking at all the 49ers. I think you get everybody in. You know who I really like this week? For some reason, Johnny Ballgame gut feel. Love Ayuk this week. I just feel like he's going to get – I think Debo's going to get a lot of attention. Kittle's going to get a lot of attention. Get Ayuk in yours. He's not too expensive. I really like him. I like Ayuk this week. I like Elijah. Careful with both running backs in San Francisco. Both of them have an injury designation right now. Both of them are questionable. And Elijah's just popped up today. That was not something that anybody really kind of knew about until today. So just kind of make sure you monitor that. On the Eagles side, who are you looking at, Chuck?
You know, I'm wavering between playing Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts because I know San Francisco is very good against the run, but they can be thrown on. And I think the Eagles are going to have to throw, and I think Jalen's going to have to run a lot. Use his legs. And so I kind of like his prospects in a fantasy game this week as I did last week, but even more this week because they're not going to get way ahead like they did against the Giants and then shut it down and just run the rest of the clock. This is going to be a game from start to finish, and Jalen Hurts might have to put up a lot of fantasy numbers to keep them in the game. So I don't know. I like Joe Burrow against the Chiefs defense. Don't get me wrong, but I also like Jalen Hurts. And I'm kind of trying to avoid the running game for the Eagles, the running backs.
Yeah, me too.
Because they're sharing.
I might go Kenny Gainwell, who catches some more passes out of. So I might consider that. I might.
Yeah,
they might
he's
check
cheap.
down to him.
He's cheap.
And he's cheap. I don't know if I feel the same way about Hurts, only because, I mean, let's face it, Dak's still a pretty good quarterback and can still throw the rock all around, and I thought they shut him down. I think San Francisco's got the best overall defense in the playoffs still right now, and so I feel like the Chiefs can be thrown on, and I feel like I really, of course, I like Burrow, but I've liked Burrow all year, and I've had him every fantasy chance I can. So I like Burrow a little bit better than I like Hurts.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, they're both about the same
right
price.
Yeah.
So it's pick your poison, right? Who you want to roll with? And I know Johnny Ballgame will always roll with Joe Burrow. So let's talk about the Bengals at the Chiefs. Before we do that, though, who's going to win, San Francisco or Philly? Who you got?
Frisco.
Okay, you're taking Frisco. I think the Eagles.
I like the over in this game too.
I was going to ask you about that. I think I like the over too. It's going to be close. It's going to be tight. I feel like a 28-24 game, so they'll get over. But I like.
Over, but just barely.
Yeah. All right.
You like the Eagles?
I do.
Okay.
In a close one. All right. Bengals at Chiefs. Bengals are favored by 1.5, and I think
that changed today.
I think it changed because of the injury to Mahomes.
Yes.
And the over/under is 46.5. So, John, fantasy-wise, who are you looking at?
Get all your Bengals in. Get all your Chiefs in. I mean, seriously. I really like Pacheco in this. McKinnon kind of disappeared, and Pacheco's been kind of a stud over the last couple of weeks. Now, I will say the Bengals' run defense is actually pretty good. But in my fervor to stay away from any Bengal running back and not Bengal running back, but Eagle running back, I kind of like Pacheco in this a little bit more. I like Kadarius Toney this week. I don't like Travis Kelce as much because I think the Bengals are going to. Not Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce. I think the Bengals are going to shut him down again. You look at what he did last time. He didn't do anything against the Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals have a sneaky good defense.
Yes.
They have been shutting your best weapons down
Yep.
week after week for the last 6 to 8 weeks, and they're going to key in on Kelsey. So that is why I'm fading Kelsey this week because he is expensive, and I'm looking. I think the Bengals are going to jump out in front of, like they did last week. They're going to jump out in front early, and Patrick Mahomes is going to have to play from behind. And so I think this is a McKinnon week because I don't think Pacheco's going to get shit on the ground, Johnny. And I think they're going to have to throw a lot, and I think that's when McKinnon comes into play. So I'm on McKinnon a little more than Pacheco.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't mind. And again, I don't mind either of those. I think both of those are probably a good choice. I wouldn't even blame somebody for playing both, quite frankly.
And if
I think running backs are weak this week.
If Mahomes wasn't hurt as well, Johnny, I would think he would be the number one quarterback this week because he is going to be playing from behind. But I'm worried about that injury. You know, that's no joke. It's a high ankle sprain. Yeah, he says he's going to play. He's going to be fine. But we saw once the injury happened in the second half, he was hobbling around. He wasn't the same guy.
Yeah, and I also that's kind of why I liked Pacheco a little bit more than McKinnon. For me,
I think they're going to run.
I think they're going to have to run a bunch. Now, again, the Bengals' run defense is actually really good.
Really good.
But the Chiefs' run offense is good when they use it. So I think it's going to be interesting.
I like Joe Mixon, though. If you had to take a running back in this game, I'm playing Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was fantastic last week. The Chiefs are not good against the run defense. I think they're going to get a mouthful of Joe Mixon and maybe even sprinkled in a little Perine.
I was just going to say, if you want to get a little Samarja P. Ryan, I think you pay down for him a little bit. Like if you're looking for a cheap option and you've got to put somebody in, I think P. Ryan catches passes in this game. I think if it does turn into a shootout, I think he actually gets in. He's a better pass blocker than Mixon.
All right, who's going to win?
Bengals.
Joe owns Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it's Bengals.
That's his daddy. So I'm going to go with the Bengals too, especially now that the injury to Mahomes. I think there's just too much going against the Chiefs. The only thing that could save them now, I think, is some bad weather. And even then, Joe Burrow doesn't.
You just saw what they did in bad weather. They bad weathered Buffalo.
Yeah. So, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the only way the Bengals lose this game is if they beat themselves.
Yeah, turnovers would kill them, which they haven't been doing at all. They don't turn the ball over
right now. Knock on some wood right now, please. Knock on wood. I'm going to need you to knock on some wood. You know better than that, Chuck.
All right.
Season in review.
Season in review. Top 10s. We did 2 weeks ago when we were on the air. We did the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. Today we're going to try to get in the running backs, tight ends, and defenses. And we're just going to roll through the tight ends and defenses quick, and we'll spend more time at the running back position. So let's get the boring out of the way. Let's talk about the top 10 defenses, Johnny. I want to know what your take was fantasy-wise and what you think for next year. Patriots finished number 1 again. I believe that's 2 years in a row.
It's kind of crazy to me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Do we think they're going to continue their reign of dominance next year?
They've got a lot of really good young players. They've got the backfield's good. I mean, other than McCourty, obviously, is old, but everybody else is young. They've got some good safeties there. I like their linebackers. I actually really like that defense for next year. So, yeah, I would say they're pretty good for next year.
Number 2 is the San Francisco 49ers. They led the league in turnover differential from offense to defense. In other words, San Francisco turned the ball over very little and turned it over on defense a lot.
Yeah.
They had the biggest differential there. So I like their defense. They're opportunistic. They're stingy. They're number 1 against the run. I like them to be very similar next year. They're in a weak division. Yeah. What's not to like about the 49er defense?
It's a good question.
The Eagles defense finished 3rd, and they were pretty steady. They led the league in sacks. They have a monstrous front 4 there. They get pressure on the quarterback. They have a good secondary, and that's probably why they led the league in sacks, because their secondary is really good.
Secondary's really good.
Yeah. So, and most of the guys are going to be returning next year, and in the playoffs, they've been really good. So what do we think next year?
Yeah. I like them. I actually think they're going to be number 1 or number 2 next year. I think you see New England maybe drop down to 3, but I think San Francisco and the Eagles you can throw them in a hat and toss them around. I mean, if you think about it, Actually, between the three of those, there's like a 2-point differential in per game defense. So all of them are really good. And like you said, all of them are coming back. A couple might lose a coordinator this year for coaching purposes, but I don't think so. I think both of them will be fine.
So the Bills, sorry, Johnny, the Bills actually finished third in points per game. They finished fourth overall because they didn't get, remember they canceled the game with the Chiefs.
Right.
But technically the Bills finished ahead of the Eagles in points per game, but it was very close. What do we think about the Bills defense? I'm thinking they're not as good as we thought they were. They faded at the back end of the season, and in the playoffs they weren't very good. So next year they're not going to probably have Von Miller. What do we think?
Yeah, I don't think they bring back Vaughn. I think they're going to try to go a little bit of a youth movement. I think you see them invest a lot in the draft. Yeah, so Brandon Beane is going to bring in some free agents. Him and his brother Billy are going to talk about it, I guess. But no, I think Brandon Beane will get that defense right again next year. So I think they're going to be top 5. They usually are.
Okay. Dallas Cowboys, they were top 5. They finished 5th this year. I thought the Cowboys defense was really good, but they had a couple games where they completely fell apart, which was interesting. They weren't as sturdy as these other teams we were talking about. Yeah. But when they played well, they were really tough.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at their per game, they're right there with the Eagles. So they're, 0.4 below the Eagles. Here's what I say about Cowboys. Cowboys, this is another reason I don't like McCarthy very much. I think the Cowboys play to their competition. And if you look at the people they lost to or played poorly to, they weren't great teams. They were actually teams that they should have killed. And they don't. And so that's the part that bothers me a little bit about the Cowboys. And I think they're going to lose Dan Quinn because I think Dan Quinn's going to get a shot at being the head coach. I think that defense might suffer next year.
All right. And number 6, they really came on in the second half of the season. The Washington Commandos.
Who knew?
Their defense was out of control there, especially in the middle weeks, like week 9, 10, 11. They're really tough. And then they finished off the season strong. So what do we think for next year? If they get healthy, they get everyone back.
I think they get healthy. I think they are a really formidable team.
Okay. Yeah. Number 7 was the Ravens. Always have a good secondary. Pretty good secondary. Really good against the run, generally speaking. They're always up there, the Ravens. So, and they're in a tough division. They play a lot of tough games against the Steelers and the Bengals and so forth. So I don't expect anything different. They'll probably finish top 10 next year as well.
Agree.
Okay. And then let's finish up the top 10. The Jets were 8, Packers were 9, and the Chiefs were 10. Jets, I'm surprised they were this low. I thought their defense was better than that, but apparently not.
Yeah, they were really average at the end of the season. Just average defense. They played much better in the beginning of the season, the middle of the season. Just very average towards the end. I think that whole team kind of, I was actually really disappointed with the Jets this year. I thought Saleh let that team get a little bit out of control. The Mike White T-shirts, all that kind of crap down there towards the end. I think he just needs to stabilize and get things right next year. I think that Jets is going to be the defense is going to be much improved next year.
All right, enough of the defenses. Let's talk about some tight ends real quick. We'll run through these fast. Travis Kelce was your number 1 tight end by the widest margin we've seen in a long time. We've already talked about this. He averaged 21 points a game, which is pretty freaking good. But the next best tight end averaged 14, and that was George Kittle in a points per game. So Skittles. Hawkinson was 3rd. So we've discussed already Kelce's merit. He's amazing. Let's talk about George Kittle. Started out the season really slow, got better with Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy appears to be like he's going to be the guy next year as well. So I think Kittle's a fine pick. What do you think?
I do too. I think he's kind of a sneaky pick. I think you can get him in a little bit later rounds, mid rounds. Because he doesn't get drafted in the top 3 rounds anymore like he used to. But I like Skittles. I thought he got way better towards the end of the year. He started off on injured reserve for the first 2 weeks, so he didn't even play in the first 2 weeks. And I think it took him a bit to get back into it. And I don't think Trey Lance is a really good quarterback. So I think that's why I think he was better with Garoppolo and then way better with Purdy.
How about Hawkinson? He was really, really good with the Vikings. He also had one explosive game with Detroit before he got traded where he scored like 40, 50 fantasy points in one game. I like Hawkinson in Minnesota, though. He's capable of putting up monster numbers He gets you those 100-yard games occasionally and 10 catches.
Yeah, my only issue there is he's one of 4 people who get a lot of passes. So, you're always playing second fiddle to Jefferson, but then Kittle's always playing second fiddle to Debo. So I guess it is what it is. I do like Hawkinson. I think he's really talented, really fast, and showed why he should be a number 1 tight end.
Let's talk about Mark Andrews. He finished 4th. Really disappointing
Super
season.
disappointed. Yeah.
Not the same guy. I think he was playing banged up for a good portion of the season. You didn't have Lamar Jackson for the second half of the year.
Right.
I mean, if Lamar Jackson comes back and re-signs with the team and he's healthy, I think Mark Andrews could have a big rebound year, don't you think?
Yeah, I think he's one of those ones you'll get in a mid-round now because he really didn't look very good at all, and you're going to be real happy with Mark Andrews. I'm actually targeting him next year.
Here's a guy that was very underrated going in. I actually had him and traded him for Mark Andrews, and I wish I probably shouldn't have. But that's Dallas Goedert in Philly. He's been really good when he was healthy with Hurts. I like Dallas Goedert. He's a guy, like you said, you can get like mid-rounds, really good value.
Yeah.
And he's right there with, all the other guys, as far as points per game. He's right behind Andrews and Hawkinson, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. He plays on an offense with Smith and AJ and there's a lot of mouths to feed, and Hurts who runs. Yeah. So that's the one big pullback on him. I think Hurts is not going to run near as much next year. So I think a few more passes at the goal line for Goddard. I like him going into next year too.
A guy that surprised this year until he got hurt was Zach Ertz. He averaged 11.5 fantasy points a game, which is pretty good, especially in that offense. But I think he's a free agent. I'm not sure where he's going to end up, and he's coming off a serious injury. So, that's a guy you're going to be able to get late next year. It depends on where he lands if he doesn't retire. I mean, he's getting up there in age. What do we think, John?
Yeah, he was a surprise. I think you're absolutely right. He was definitely a surprise, but he still got something left in the tank. But like you said, we don't know how he's going to come back from this last injury. We don't know where he's going to be, what kind of offense. I think he's a wait and see for next year.
Evan Ingram, to me, was the biggest surprise in fantasy football. Nobody drafted this guy.
No.
Him and Geno Smith, nobody drafted them. We didn't expect anything. He's on a new team. And Evan Ingram was pretty good. He averaged 11.4 fantasy points per game, right behind Zach Ertz, finished 7th overall. But in the playoffs, he's been fantastic. So I like Evan Ingram. If he returns to the Jaguars next year, I like him a lot.
I do too. I like him as a part of this really good offense. And he had about 4 or 5 weeks there later part of the season, 14, 50, 14, 23, like 4 weeks, just really gangbusters coming out of the gate. So yeah, I like Evan.
How about David Njoku? Next year you'll have a healthier Deshaun Watson. He won't miss any time.
He was a surprise for me this year.
Yeah, I think Njoku's a good. Yeah, I think he's a good player. They really when they gave him that contract, everyone was scratching their head like, what? And then we saw him have a couple monster games, and I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's.
It's like they knew something we didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very athletic and talented, so I like Njoku. Yeah. Darren Waller, if he returns, and depending on the quarterback situation, I still like Waller. He's your 9th quarterback or tight end, and then Dalton Schultz was 10th. When healthy, he's better than he showed this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like the play calling there in Dallas for some reason. Also, let's not forget about Freiermuth at 11. I think that guy, his quarterback's going to only get better, and I think Freiermuth is a guy that I really like for next year.
All right, let's dig in a little deeper with the running backs and finish this up.
RBs.
So if you're going by points per game, Josh Jacobs was not number 1. It was Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry did miss a game due to injury. But, I mean, Derrick Henry, again, is your number 1 running back.
He's a monster.
He is a monster. And he's going to be back next year. The Titans still have the same coaching staff. They're going to run the ball. Tannehill might be back. We'll see.
They're going to get a different offensive coordinator, but they're going
to get a different offensive coordinator. Hopefully he can present more, space outside so that Derrick Henry's got the middle to run up through.
Here's what I don't get. Derrick Henry can catch the ball, dump it to that guy in space on screens. I don't understand. I just don't understand. That guy.
They started to do that a little bit this year, though, John.
Not as much as they should have, but yeah, they did a little bit more. I would do it all the time.
Number 2 is Josh Jacobs. Came out of
Huge
nowhere.
surprise.
Huge surprise.
Huge.
Drafted him in the 5th round. Congratulations. He was your finish in points at number 1, second in points per game. Fantastic season. He was a threat out of the backfield catching balls. He was running the ball in from the goal line. He had a great season. He's a free agent. Do the Raiders re-sign him? We'll see. It's going to, for me, to know where I want to draft Jacobs next year, I got to see what unfolds, where he ends
They're
up.
going to tag him.
If they tag him, though, who's their quarterback? Because if it's Aaron Rodgers, I like Jacobs a lot. But if it just depends. So we'll see.
Yeah. But think about it. Carr had a really crap year.
But that's what I'm saying. They relied on Jacobs a little more than they probably normally would.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons. One being the quarterback play was not good. And 2 being he's on his last year of his contract and they were just going to run him into the ground. So we'll see.
Yep.
All right, CMC, Christian McCaffrey finished 3rd. Great year. Stayed healthy all year, which was a surprise. Missed, a game because he was traded there to the Niners. He actually played in the game, but really played very sparingly.
It's really weird. Yeah,
that brought his average down a little bit. But, I mean, honestly, he was probably the second best running back in football this year, if you take that into account. I was super impressed with McCaffrey staying healthy this year. And we called it, John. We called it. We said, avoid Jonathan Taylor at number 1 and take McCaffrey instead. I did it. I'm happy I did. Although I didn't win the league, I came close, and McCaffrey was one of the reasons why. Yeah.
I think John Lynch, brilliant at trading and getting McCaffrey, because that 49ers team's just loaded now.
It is truly good.
Really cool. And he's, he's home. He's a Stanford kid. He played there. So it's just a really great moment where the running back, the personal life of that running back and their background meet with this team of destiny. And, it's just one of those cool stories where you're like, of course he should be on the San Francisco 49ers. And of course they traded for him. So
really, and he looked like the old CMC, right? He looked like that guy.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler. Again, I apologize to Austin Eckler. Actually, halfway through this, about 5 weeks in, he was like an RB2. They were spelling him a lot. He wasn't doing as much. And then all of a sudden he exploded and was the best running back in football for like 5-6 weeks in a row. And then down at the tail end of the season, he went back to being like kind of like an RB2. So I don't know what to think on Eckler, but overall, the overall work, the body of work was good. He had a good season. He finished higher than I thought he would. And I apologize to Austin Eckler for doubting him again.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, even from like week 11, 23 points, week 12, 31 points, 13, he went down to 15. Not great, but not horrible. 28, 18, 29, 44, and then his last week was 11. So
yeah, I'm talking about like in the playoff game too. He didn't.
Oh
yeah. So but I just don't know what to think. Well, I want to see who their offensive coordinator is going to be there.
Yeah, me too.
And he is a year older now. He's getting close to the age 29, I believe. So we'll see. Next guy is Saquon Barkley. He had a monster year. Finished 5th overall in points per game, and they ran him into the ground. They used him a lot.
They did.
They used him a lot, and he's an expiring contract. Do they re-sign him? Do they tag him? What are they going to do? I think they'll probably tag him and keep him around. Yep. And if they do, they'll probably run him in the ground, like you said, again. So I like Barkley again next year. I think the Giants will try to improve that offensive line, though, because Barkley didn't have a lot of space to run in, John.
Right. Yeah, I think they've improved that. And again, getting better receivers on the outside that actually scare defenses will help Barkley. So I think that'll help them too.
One of the guys that had a better season than I anticipated was Nick Chubb, because once they got Kareem Hunt in the backfield, they seem to have like a role like Hunt was the passing down back and Chubb was like the first down back, the second down back.
Yeah.
And they were sharing touchdowns, but this year kind of switched back to Chubb being like the main guy, and Hunt was on the back burner, and Chubb had a nice season. He had the most rushing yards he's had, and he had many touchdowns. He was good. He caught some balls.
I wasn't crazy about him in the fantasy playoffs, though. I mean, you look at a 13, a 12, a 16, and 18. Like, that was a little rough during your fantasy playoffs. So if you had him and you were depending on him, and to me, Chuck, it seems like that happens every year with Nick Chubb. Seems like he starts to fade towards the end of the year because they run him the shit out of him in the beginning of the year, toward the middle of the year, and then you start to see him fade at the end of the year. And it's happened.
Yeah, I remember last year the same thing.
Last 2 years, I think, have both been the same thing. So I still am not a giant Chubb guy. That's not
You're not a giant Chubb?
That's not true. But anyway, let's just move on.
That's a good sound clip right there. I'm not a giant Chubb guy.
I'm not a giant Chubb guy.
He's a small Chubb guy. All right. Breece Hall at 7. As a rookie, averaged 22 points a game, went down with an injury, sadly, midway through the last game that he played. I thought Breece Hall looked like one of the top 3 running backs in football. And when they started to use him on a regular basis after the first few weeks of feeling it out, he was fantastic. And I know he suffered a torn ACL, but I'm going to say it right now, guys, you're going to be able to get him in the 3rd round, and you should do exactly that because he's going to be a top 5 running back again next year.
Are you scared about the injury?
I am not, because it was a clean tear. He'll get it fixed. I feel like it happened early enough in the season where he'll have enough time to recover fully. And it might not happen right away into week 1, but he's going to be at pretty much full strength pretty early in the season. So
yeah, he's just so young.
He's so good too. God,
yeah, he was really good.
He's fast. He can catch the ball. He's explosive with his cuts. He's got good vision. I love everything about Breece Hall.
Yep, you've had that love affair for the last year.
It's college, baby. All right, number 8. This sounds like a number 8 guy. I mean, every year he seems like he finishes around 8. Yeah. Joe Mixon.
Joey Mixon, always in the mixing.
Always in the mixing. Yeah, he's steady. He's not great. He did have one fantastic game where he had 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, ridiculous points
out of nowhere. But other than that, he's just kind of like, he's steady, but he's not like a guy I want unless I'm getting him like the 5th.
They just don't use him enough. Like I feel like they abandoned the run pretty early.
Well, when you have Joe Burrow,
they did start to use him a little more in the passing game. I mean, he closed out the season with a 22-point and a 21-point game. So I always like Mixon because I just like him. I like to get some Bengals on there, but I'm kind of with you. Like, it always feels like he finishes right about here, and they don't use him enough.
Yep. Tony Pollard finished 9th. I thought Tony Pollard was excellent. And I think they used Ezekiel a little bit too much and not enough.
Imagine Pollard if they used him like in the way. Like, I think he's a top 5 running back if they used him that way.
I agree. And he's not far off from being a top 5 running back, to be honest. He's a couple points a game behind those other guys in the top 5. So if he got a larger role, which I anticipate next year, and I think like even if they bring back Zeke and Pollard, I think they realize that Pollard is more explosive and they'll give him more.
Zeke will be the short yardage and goal line guy.
All right. Number 10.
Love him.
Kenneth Walker. Super impressive.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm aiming next year to take Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker to be my 2 backs.
Wow.
And that can be done. In the 2nd and 3rd round, I think that can be done. Okay, sure. Depending on where you're drafting. And obviously, it's too early to tell, right, John? I mean, like, I don't even know what draft position I have. But if you could pull that off, getting them in the 2nd and 3rd round, I think you have 2 top 5 running backs in your backfield.
For sure. I agree with you. That's interesting, though, because you'd have to really fade your wide receivers.
Unless you took a wide receiver in the 1st round.
He says confidently.
I'm already thinking about my strategy for next year. I shouldn't.
I will say this. I suffered so much in the running back section that I thought I'm not going wide receiver first again. Like that, it really hurt me this year. So
I agree. Even though Jefferson was the right play and he was fantastic.
He was fantastic, but if I don't have any running backs to play, and I had injuries too, so I mean that it's not really fair to say it didn't work completely, but yeah. It's
tough when you don't have like 2 running backs that you can count on each week. It makes it very difficult to win in fantasy football, Johnny.
I know. And I really bet on that Dameon Pierce thing a little bit too much. But it
was
great.
a good bet, and in the beginning of the season, he was good.
Yeah, but again, he got injured. And even his last 2 games, I mean, a couple 17-point games, it's nothing to sneeze at. It's just, right there in the middle, he was like 24, 39, 28, 21. Like those were good weeks. 18, 27. You're like, okay, this guy's
he hit the wall.
Starting to come on. He hit a little bit of a wall for a couple of weeks. Then he got injured, and then he was out. So, but look for him next year. Like I still think he finishes top 10 next year.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. I mean, let's real quick. James Conner, Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson. They all finished right outside the top 10. Any of these guys? I mean, I think Jonathan Taylor will get back in the top 10 next year.
I like Taylor next year. I do. I like him next year. Where I did not like him this year, I can't wait to try to draft him next year. I'm going to get a lot of shares. I have no desire to have Dalvin Cook on my team.
Me neither. I think he looked
zero desire.
He didn't look as explostive this year, and
Madison still looks better than him.
I agree.
I don't care about Aaron Jones, Ramondre. Belichick. He just plays with our emotions too much. A guy I like is the other Cook. I actually think Buffalo makes the other Cook the starter next year, and I like him next year.
James Cook. Yep. All right. Yeah. All right, Johnny Ballgame. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Jonathan Ballgame for his input tonight. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I loved it. Thank you, Reaper. Always fantastic when you host the show. Less work for me, and I get to just be, Johnny Ballgame. So.
We're going to see how we do in the fantasy playoffs for this week, and we'll get back to you next week and talk about that, get you all prepared for the Super Bowl. I'm going to head out to Florida for a trip, so we'll take a break in between like the bye week of the Super Bowl, which is the perfect time to take a break, Johnny, because the NFL is taking a break as well.
Because we need it.
But we'll be here next week to keep you updated, so hit that like button, subscribe, comment, tell us what you want on the show for topics. We'll get them on there for you. And thank you very much.
Help you.
Help us help you. Help you help us. How about that?
That's right. Oh, nice. It's a win-win.
So, Johnny, we'll see him next week.
Yeah, next week,
Thank you very
Bo.
much. Aloha.
Aloha.